Welcome back to Media and Money. We are now joined by Oresti Patricios, the CEO of Ornico Group, who will highlight where the various motoring brands have spent their cash. Welcome, Oresti, and obviously Mark will be joining us in this segment as well. Oresti, what were the surprises in terms of the figures looking at 2008 ad spend for motoring?
I think there's two amazing things in that. A lot of money has been spent within bakkies and 4x4s and that area. The bakkies have increased in ad spend. And the other surprising thing is a lot of the money has moved from SABC onto DSTV. And Mnet, yeah.
What would you make of that move, Mark? Particularly DSTV?
Yeah, I think it's very, very interesting. Obviously, in terms of DSTV's growth, not just in South Africa, but within Africa as a whole as well, and even into the Middle East. So the potential for that. A lot of the car companies now focusing more on being representatives within Africa as a continent, as opposed to just within South Africa, as it's acting as a base, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think also the target markets, if you look at the target market of the people that are watching DSTV, I suppose they've got a lot more money to spend than target market watching SABC One.
There's the affluence factors to that as well. I think it's very interesting to note that SuperSport 1, which is always kind of the leading sports channel, has a lower share of the motoring ad spend than SuperSport 3, which is the soccer channel.
And it makes sense that Africa is also quite a big market for bakkies, particularly, and 4x4s. Then it makes sense that the platforms DSTV would see that increase in ad spend.
Yeah, I think so. But also, I think who's going to come right first is probably businesses. So let's start advertising. They'll start buying. Yeah, so let's start advertising to them. Yeah.
At that level. What's interesting to see is that the VW ad, the Golf 6, spent 8.8 million on the one commercial. Remember the cheetah ad?
Cheetah. Yeah.
We actually have it showing, I think, Darren.
So what's interesting about that is, I think if you talk to people and you say, and you think of the ad, it's a really feel-good ad. Everybody remembers the cheetah.
Yeah.
But the brand retention, do you think, your view on that?
Well,
people remember it's a VW ad, or do they remember the cheetah?
Well, really, from an anecdotal research, because I haven't really seen the research numbers at the end of the day, yeah, you remember the cheetah at the end of the day. And I think that's, I mean, it really feels good, but do you remember the VW? I'm not sure. But what's also interesting is that Golf is no more. They've just auctioned the last Golf, and
the last City Golf.
The last City Golf.
Yes.
City Golf,
the last
yes.
City Golf. And yeah, they made 3 times the price, and it's donated to a PE charity. And yeah, so maybe they should have linked up one with the other.
Mark, I want you to add on to the fact that obviously it's been the recession, and as Jackie mentioned earlier in the interview that you had earlier, really the motoring sector has really taken a huge knock in terms of sales, of car sales. However, the advertising figures are saying otherwise.
They do seem to be saying otherwise. I mean, we've got the leading they'll add revenue generators in the Toyota, the Ford Bantam, and 21 million rand across TV alone from November 08 to 09. The Toyota Hilux, we've talked about that, and obviously that's working. It's the top selling vehicle in South Africa. Ford Ranger as well, 19 million, and Mazda 3. I think we were joking earlier that if Ford and Mazda pulled their TV ad budget, TV would collapse.
What would be left of it?
Hyundai coming across as quite a force to be reckoned with in the advertising space.
But for Hyundai for a while, believe it or not, have been
not just 2010 specifically then.
Yeah, I think 2010 has made a difference, but they've been a top spender for quite a while. Yeah, the Koreans are going.
But just on that point, with the Eastern models coming in, how do you stay competitive in terms of pricing? They've come in with a bang. And at really low prices. So how do you stay competitive and keep your brand presence?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things. Number one, they've come in with a cheap price with all these features, but it's really about such an emotional buy at the end of the day. So
it's a luxury
Toyota to VW, they've all built their brand. So you kind of feel.
But entry level, though, is a different story, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Although
versus an aspirational sort of brand.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think you're right. And at the end of the day, I know that the numbers are down. I think they sold 300,000 vehicles in the last year, as opposed to 500,000 vehicles. And I don't know where the breakdown is. But yeah, I think the brands, and if you look at some of the Mazda low-end, bottom-end markets and the Ford, some really, really nice advertising that is coming out of those agencies at the moment.
And we are seeing a very strong shift. Certainly 2010, I think we're going to see a very strong focus on the very, very entry-level vehicles. We're going to see Ford coming in with its Indian-built Figo, for example, later in the year. And Volkswagen has to replace the City Golf. Let's not forget, when the City Golf finishes, it's the last car being sold out of a showroom is 116,000 rand.
Yeah.
Wow.
Still in the 4x4 categories, though, what was surprising for me was the Mahindra basically not even spending at all on advertising. And that's also an entry type of level vehicle for your sort of 4x4 vehicles.
Yeah, I think they've probably advertised more on print. And they've maybe done a little bit of internet advertising, but really probably more on print than on TV and radio at the end of the day.
Mahindra's quite a big spend in the motoring sections of newspapers, and also with a lot of the magazines, lifestyle, agricultural magazines and things like that. They've always kind of played that side of the game. And I think that will probably continue. We've also seen Tata, for example, as a company that was very successful when it first launched. Now that flight to quality changing back to maybe the Toyotas and the Volkswagens, but they're advertising in other ways. I mean, they're choosing to go with some of the youth channels like Vuzu and even MTV. So they're going that way instead to try and entice the youth buyers in to a budget vehicle.
Very clever though, because once a brand, you know, sticks, I think you become, specifically for the youth market, you become a brand ambassador one day if you buy into the brand now as a student. So I think that's quite a good strategy.
You ultimately go from Tata into a Jaguar. Well,
Exactly.
But actually, while we touch on the subject of those Tata brands, Jaguar and Land Rover, we were talking about the fact that it's very fascinating that Land Rover chooses not to spend much money with channels such as Discovery and National Geographic, which you would think would be very, very clear target channels for them.
Yeah. The motor vehicle guys have also shifted a little bit away from retail advertising, which I would have thought, you know, this time of when there's a recession, they're actually pushing the retail, but they're pushing brands. And I suppose that's for future growth.
Right.
You know, so when you're looking at brands, you need to look at it from a future growth perspective. So they're expecting an uptick in the market, without a doubt.
We have to wrap. Any final thoughts, Oresti?
No, I think the car advertisers must look at a gap in the market, because they all seem to be doing the same kind of advertising. So whether you change the logo or not, it makes no difference in terms of the ad.
Stand out of the clutter, break through the clutter.
Absolutely.